What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the early week college basketball betting preview and weekend recap. I'm Stucky, and joining me, as always, are Mike Calabrese and Greg Waddell. So, what are we going to cover today? We will talk about the weekend that was. Exciting weekend in college basketball, as always, with March right around the corner. I think we have 20 days until Selection Sunday. 24 until the first Thursday of the tournament. Can't wait. We'll talk a little bit about the weekend rants, and then we'll talk a little bubble. We'll, just like you guys did last weekend when I was traveling, we'll each take a team. Well, actually, we each take two teams on the bubble, buy or sell. Whether that's buying or selling, you can take it two ways: buying them to get in, or selling a team to not make the dance, or whether or not you're buying or selling a team to potentially make a run. We'll call it, potential to get to the second weekend. And then we'll obviously talk about a couple spots we have circled early this week for Monday and Tuesday. But let's start things off with the weekend that was. Greg, I'll start with you. Anything you want to rant about? Any key takeaways? What do you got?
Yeah, I got a key takeaway and I got a rant. I'll start with showing some love to a team that Calabrese tried to tell me I should expect this to happen to. Houston deserves to be considered in that very top tier of college basketball alongside Purdue and UConn.
Deserves to be considered.
Listen. I'm correcting myself. I'm correcting myself because I came here on the BBOC live on Saturday and I called them 1C. That was the phrase. I said they're 1C. They're not 1C. They are equals to the top two teams that I thought were the top two teams in college basketball, if not ahead of it, like Ken Pom has tried to tell us they are all season long. Look, you don't go on the road against a top 25 team like Baylor and just smack them in the mouth and lead by 20 at half, the way that Houston did. And I know that it wasn't actually 20, I don't believe, but it felt like it, right? They just destroyed them physically. You nailed it, Calabrese. Ray J. Dennis had 2 turnovers in the first 90 seconds of the game. I could not have been more wrong about that. Now, Baylor did make it interesting, which maybe is why I'm not always going to be able to be all the way in on Houston, the fact that they did open the door back up. But, man, the way Jamal Shead is playing, with that defense, which is like top 3 in every single individual defensive category you can find, I think it's historically elite on that end. And if they get Shed playing the way he has been, they could certainly win a national championship. So this is me eating crow. And then my rant quickly, Michigan State, man, Tom Izzo, he starts his 5-star freshman, Xavier Booker, on Sunday afternoon, first time this season. I've been begging for it all season long. His centers stink. That's been the story. He apparently trusts Xavier Booker. Booker did some really nice things. He hit a 3. He had 3 blocks, looked like the guy. And then with an 8-point lead with 8 minutes left in the game, he never checked back into the game. Izzo went to Mady Sissoko in crunch time. They blow a 10-point lead. How about a loss to Ohio State? Now you're firmly back on the bubble. I'm frustrated on behalf of Michigan State fans everywhere who just watch Tom Izzo keep driving this team into a wall over and over again, trusting these horrible centers.
Yeah, Michigan State was one of my key takeaways. Why not try to use Booker down the stretch? I don't get it. And are we sure Michigan State's in the field? I mean, obviously, if they win at Purdue, which I can't see, they're in. But are we 100% convinced? And we'll talk about some bubble teams. But if they lose one of these more winnable games down the stretch and then lose in like the first round of the Big Ten tournament, aren't they potentially out?
100%. They're right on the cut line. And look, their last week after Purdue, which we all think they're going to lose, is Boo Buie on their senior night. Boo Buie has historically owned Michigan State head-to-head. And then you got to go at Assembly Hall. I know Indiana's down, but like that's not an easy environment to get a win. Things are trending in the wrong direction for sure.
Yep. Calabrese, what do you got?
Can we talk court storming for a moment? I'll kick it to the panel here. I was someone who stormed a court before. I started at University of Missouri, 2005 in the spring. It was a down year for Quinn Snyder's team. They ended up going to the NIT, but the last regular season game of the year, they upset number 7 Kansas in the rivalry game on their home floor, and I was there storming the court. And one thing that came to mind for me is Kansas brought their own state troopers, and they had them basically flank the team One of them had a pistol out. And I got to tell you, when somebody sees a gun in that situation, all of a sudden the C parts and those guys are able to get off the floor. This whole thing where it's like, oh, we have to end court storming. No, college athletics has more money than it's ever had. I want to be a job creator. Send more state troopers, send bodyguards for every single player, and have an exit strategy. When you're a team like Duke and you're ranked in the top 10 and you're playing against a school that hasn't beat you in forever, you got to prepare and have some kind of exit plan for that scenario. The fact that Flip got hurt, it sucks. I feel bad for him, but it's not like he was assaulted and something horrific happens and the paramedics were there. He twisted his knee up. I think that's a bit of an overreaction to say that we can't storm the court ever again. There's things that can be done based on the home team in terms of their security and the away team in terms of their security. Have a good plan together, and you get to enjoy it as the fans, and the players get to be safe. I think this is something that can be solved, and I think this whole overreaction that we have to do away with it. Also, people being like, Wake didn't deserve to storm the court. They were favored. Spare me the bullshit, okay? Listen, they're unranked up against Duke, who they always want to beat, and they finally do it. That's an absolute court storming worthy performance. So I think it's ridiculous on that front as well.
Who was but yeah, I'll give my thoughts in a second, but that Missouri team, that wasn't like that wasn't Paulding and it wasn't Rush.
It was post-Paulding, post-Rush. I believe Arthur Johnson was our best player. He was a center at the time. Not a great Mizzou team, not a vintage Mizzou.
Like Linus Kleiza on that team, maybe?
I think he was. Kleiza may have been the next year when he put also one of the best names in college basketball history, the Vanilla Gorilla. He put the team on his back for a bit the following season. I think Matt Mitchell was in the house as well. I don't know if he got to the court. We had a mutual friend who was an absolute brick, house, and I just basically used him as a fullback to push through 3 to 4 levels of the crowd to get onto the floor. I made it onto the front page of the Kansas City, I guess it's Gazette or Star, but yeah, that was my college high at Mizzou before I transferred.
Yeah, the Rush Paulding teams, one of my personal all-time favorite teams. Like just as a fan, I love that team. I think they lost to Duke in the second round. One of those years they were
one of those years, and they also lost to D Wade and Novak. Novak hit like a bunch of threes in overtime to go to the Final Four. Mizzou still looking to break through that ceiling and make the Final Four for the first time.
Yep, and I believe that 05 team. Sorry for anyone that's under the age of 35. I believe that Kansas team that year, they lost to Missouri to close out the regular season. They lost to Bucknell in the first round.
They sure did. They were selling Bucknell t-shirts. They were selling Bucknell t-shirts on campus. It was McNaughton.
Master Polo.
Yeah.
That Bucknell. I love that Bucknell team. I had a bet on Bucknell that game. That game was fucking awesome, by the way.
John Griffin, I think, came off the bench for that Bucknell team, and I knew him because in 4th grade, I was a very good basketball player at Waldron Mercy Academy. I was like our all-star, and John Griffin at St. Margaret's was the all-star. His basketball career went a little better than mine, but I was always kind of pulling for him as somebody who used to have a little rivalry with. But yeah, that Bucknell team, that was amazing. That little baby hook in the lane by McNaughton to win the game was phenomenal.
Yeah, I was an all-star in 8th grade, BYU athletic club. And that's why we're all talking about basketball now, not playing. It's when we peaked. But my thoughts, Greg, I'll let you jump in. Do you have any thoughts on 2005 Missouri basketball?
I have thoughts on the simple fact that it is a good reminder as we turn the page to March, guys. The narrative back in the day was that Bill Self couldn't get it done in March in 2005, right? So just because a coach hasn't done it yet doesn't mean they're not going to end up a coach with a very great track.
Jay Wright had that. Tony Bennett. It's obviously that's always going to exist. It's a crazy tournament. It's one and done. There's going to be some coaches that go a long time without winning it. My thoughts on court storming. Yeah, it's part of college basketball. Should let it happen, but we should have there should just be massive fines if you do it. Like there's a way to do it at the end of the game. It's like you see sometimes teams do this. Let the other team get off the court. And sometimes you can do that like while you're dribbling it out, right? The other team ushers but sometimes at the buzzer, Okay, it's great. You would want to rush the court right when when the horn sounds, but sometimes that's not possible. So let the other team get off, and then you can rush the court. If you rush the court beforehand, big fine. I think that solves it, like a huge fine, right? And then you just have the security guards there saying no one rushed till the other team leaves, and then you can rush the court. Because there's just no need to rush the court when the other team's on the court. Like, it's just going to lead to shit like this over time. Injuries, fights, like just dumb shit. Greg, anything you want to add on court storming?
Just at the risk of putting myself in an unsavory light here, I think you guys covered most of it. If we could have bet, if there was a market on player most likely to get injured and then tweet that this needs to change due to court storm, Flip would have been top 5 in the market, right? Like,
yep.
He's living up to the Duke villain that we love, that we know and love. And I hope he's fully fine. I expect he's going to be fully and fine, guys. Like, if he misses time to this, I'll be genuinely shocked. But obviously, we hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, he's getting an MRI today, right? I think.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I joked on Twitter. I was like, how much more do we have to bump Wake Forest home court advantage if Filipowski's getting hurt in the court storm? I mean, how much better can they get at home? All the home juggernauts this weekend: home Kansas, home Wake Forest, home Nebraska. These teams that just never lose at home, seemingly. We're all covering machines. I guess I'll bring up, it was an awesome Saturday. There were some great games. I'll bring up the Kentucky-Alabama game. So Kentucky at its peak, at its ceiling, is one of the best teams in the country because of their offense. That Alabama is like the perfect matchup for them. And, obviously Alabama missed Reitzel. But when Kentucky can just play like, it's almost like, in a way, an all-star game. But it's kind of like a rec game, and then just their offense can come out and shine. Alabama's not that physical of a team, especially down low, and that's where Kentucky shines. Now you're going to see how and Kentucky's defense has been a little better. They've gotten lucky from 3-point shooting. There's still many holes, but now we're going to see, because this is going to tell you a lot about Kentucky. And okay, how much have they improved? Mississippi State on Tuesday is the opposite of Alabama, right? Physical team, can abuse Kentucky down low in the post, and then Kentucky has to rebound from that Alabama win. If they can go into Starkville and pick up that win, and their defense shows up and their post defense shows up, I would be impressed. I have my doubts. So I think Kentucky, they're going to be a really tough team to kind of peg when you get your bracket. Like, could they go to the Elite Eight? Yes. Could they lose in the first round? Yes. But I think a lot of it has to do with the types of teams that they get. Like, for example, if Kentucky had to play Houston at any point, oh God, I think it would get ugly. Now granted, they have some shot makers, maybe they can make it interesting, but just physical teams that can work it down, which is not Alabama. And that Alabama defense, when they're not at home, I think is going to be their downfall. I can't see that team cutting down the nets with some of their defensive holes. Greg, any thoughts on that takeaways from Kentucky, Alabama?
I think you nailed it. I have a really hard time trusting Alabama against the best opponents they play, and we spoke to it on BBOC Live, but I believe they're 1-6 against KenPom top 25 teams on the season now. Some of these losses have really been ugly for them. I love Mark Sears. I love watching that team, but there was just a clear caliber difference in that game to me, and I want to believe in Kentucky. I really do. I think their defensive improvements are legitimate, but we need to see it carry over for a couple games in a row now. They have been very streaky, where it's like one game they're hot, one game they're cold. The LSU game sticks in my mind. If they can put together like 2 weeks straight of this play, I'm going to really buy this team going into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. All right. Before we move on to bubble, anything you want to add, Calabrese?
Yeah, I think Kentucky is it's just fitting that they're probably going to slide into that 5-12 matchup where quite literally you could say to yourself, they're going to the Elite Eight or they're going to lose in the first round to McNeese or Indiana State. Like, if they just get the wrong matchup and cannot get any stops on the defensive ends, it could be curtains for them right away. But matchup dependent. I mean, Alabama, I would argue, of all the power conference teams with a winning record in the entire country, they're the best matchup for the Wildcats. Like what they struggle with defensively on the road, it just became a showcase. So I'm glad that I had the over there. That was probably the least sweatiest bet of the entire season for me. By the time I was checking in and trying to do the math in my head, I was like, they're going to score 200 points in this game.
Yeah, the Kentucky ideal path, in my opinion, is you get Arizona as your one, right? So you get, is Arizona still projected as a one? I would think.
Yeah.
Yes. Connecticut, Purdue, Houston, with their physicality and their ability, and this is assuming Kentucky can get to the second weekend and face the 1 seed, but Arizona in like a wide open game where both teams are just running up and down and it's like first to 95, that's the 1 seed that Kentucky wants. They don't want any of the others.
I actually have a twist on that, Stuck. I think they could fare well against Purdue, and it might sound crazy here, but the thing with Purdue is you got to have multiple front court bodies to throw at Edey. You got to use 15 fouls. Kentucky has 3 they can do that with. You also have to have guards that can put Edey in drop coverage and hunt shot-making opportunities over Braden Smith, over Fletcher Lawyer, who are not very physical. I think they'd really struggle with Shepard, with Dillingham, with Wagner, with Reeves. But we did this last week. It was like, what's the dream perfect draw? And I was arguing they'd rather see Purdue than Arizona. I think they could take either of them, though.
Yeah, I mean, with Purdue, their backcourt could have some success. My worry there is that Purdue would just dominate the glass on both ends, slow it up, and keep them out of transition. Would be my concern a bit. Whereas Arizona, when they get a chance to play in a game where they just want to run up and down, they're happy to oblige, and that's Kentucky's so deadly in transition. But I could see them having success against Purdue. I think Houston and UConn are the 2 worst ones for them to get.
For sure.
All right, let's move on to the bubble, and let's buy and sell. I tried to look at some markets this morning. There's only I looked at one book out there. They only have 2 teams. They have Northwestern, yes, minus 300, and Providence. I actually like Providence, no, plus 100. I have them like 4. I think they're just going based on some other sites, like shout out to Torvik and Haslametrics, and just looking at the schedule and with my projections, I think that they're and you can get them no plus 100. I think they're 45% to make it. They obviously they're at Marquette and they have UConn. So they win one of those games, they're probably in, but I don't think that they will. And then there's an elimination game against Villanova. So I think that Providence, and the committee has to weigh the fact that Hopkins is out for the year. So I think Providence no plus 100 has some value. That's the only thing I could find out there as of right now. The market's as of right now is very spotty. You'll see some odds sometimes not. And the team that I'm buying, there's no odds out there, but if I could to get into the tournament, they would be dogs right now with St. John's. And the reason for that, if you look at their schedule, they get the win at Butler would be huge, basically a coin flip game. But then they have Georgetown and DePaul left. And based on the tiebreakers, because they swept Villanova and then they split against Xavier, and then how the rest of the season should play out, I think that they're going to end up with either a 4 or a 5 seed in the Big East tournament. And then you'll probably get Providence or Villanova. And here's the thing they have in their back pocket is where the Big East tournament is played at. It's played at the Garden. So I think that St. John's has a good chance of sneaking up. And if they can get in, I think that they can be a dangerous team once they get out of the Big East. I think that, look, Dingle's playing better of late. You have the emergence of Wiltshire. If they play a team that just encourages you to work from the mid-range, like with the caulk drop, they would love to play Creighton all year round, because Jenkins and that offense just operate. They love to operate in the mid-range, but with Patino and that defense, they could make some noise. I think they're going to have a good shot to get in with how the schedule breaks. And then especially you're going to get if you're that 4 or 5, I think they win that game. And then you're going to have a chance to beat UConn on your home court, basically to lock up a tournament berth if you win that game. So I'm buying Johns to get in more than I think the market is implying. Obviously needed that win over Creighton, which they got. And then if they do get in, I think that they potentially could make it to the second weekend and be a dangerous team. But Greg, let's start with your buy.
Yeah, I went about this slightly different, mostly because I was frustrated. Like you said, the market is just so spotty. Like 1 second you can find a couple different teams, then they're taken off an hour later. The two that I'm going with do not have any odds available that I can find not to make or miss the tournament, likely because they're both going to make the tournament. But do I buy this team making a second weekend run potentially, or am I selling that? Seton Hall is my buy. I'm very, very in on what I'm seeing from this team right now. I think the whole story of Seton Hall's season since January has just been, is Kadari Richmond healthy? Is he available or not? They're 11-3 in Big East play when he has been. They've got some of the best wins in this league. Like they beat Marquette, they beat UConn. They've won on the road at St. John's, at Providence, at Butler. Those are not easy places to go in and win. I think Kadari has just been incredible, and nobody is really talking about it at a national level. I think this guy's playing like one of the top 3 or 4 guards in the country right now. He is single-handedly a guy who can dominate a game with his pace, with his change of pace, with getting to the rim, with backing you down, with hitting these tough shot-making-esque shots that kind of buy certain players national appeal in the NCAA tournament. And when I'm looking for a team I want to buy at this point in the season, I like coaches that we have seen a history of success. Shaheen Holloway, man, he's done it before. I don't know if it's a magic touch thing or not, but I know that when they get there, even if they're an underdog in that first round game, I'm not going to be afraid of an underdog mentality with a Shaheen Holloway team. I just think Kadari is going to be the best player on the floor, no matter who they play for 2 games in March. So I'm buying second weekend potential for the Pirates.
Yeah, a couple of things that I like about them. Very comfortable in the half court. They will grind a game down, play elite defense. One of the most experienced teams in the country, just loaded with experience across that roster. I mean, they start 5 seniors, right? And they're not that deep, which is kind of the one thing that worries me. But they do a really good job, despite how physical they are with defending without foul. Like what? Let me pull up they're like top 50 in free throw rate, which I wouldn't have expected. They're not too 3-point reliant, and they can just dominate the offensive glass, but just a really physical team that is going to be up in your grill and defend at an elite level with a point guard like Richmond leading the way. Yeah, they're going to be a dangerous team come March that nobody is going to want to face, and they check a lot of the boxes of a team that for a team that could potentially make a run. Let me go to you, Calabrese. Who are you buying?
So similarly, I'm cheating a little bit in this. I'm looking at the Missouri Valley and the potential to get 2 teams in. Now, if you go by Bart Torvik's TourneyCast and you look at Indiana State, he has them at just about 34% to win the automatic bid, win Arch Madness in St. Louis. But their at-large odds, he has just hovering around 16%. And I think it's a foregone conclusion they're going to win out for the rest of the regular season. And then as the 1 seed, I think it's pretty clear that they're going to get to the title game. And if they do, there's a lot of things outside of their control that they need to have happen on the bubble to be able to sneak in if Drake were to upset them in a low, let's call it a 1 possession loss, something like that. But I just view them right now at 26-5 with all of the advanced metrics loving them so much. We know the committee at least consults some of these stats. They're top 10 in points per game at 84. They're first in rim and 3 rate, which means that they're one of the most efficient teams in the country, top 15 in floor percentage, 3-point shooting, foul shooting, defensive rebounding percentage. They bring a lot to the table in that regard. But in terms of a team, if they were to sneak in, and they're going to need to win the automatic bid, being the Drake Bulldogs, if they get in, this is one of the teams I have circled as an 11 or 12 seed to make a run to get to the second weekend. You look at what they've done against Indiana State. They split with the Sycamores, and they were tied up with Indiana State with under a minute to go at their place. They're 42nd in turnover margin, which is a stat that I really lean on in the tournament because it's great if you force turnovers, but if you're giving the ball away as well, it's kind of a wash. So they're plus over 2.5 per game. They're really strong offensively, not quite as strong as Indiana State, but they're 17th in shooting efficiency. Very good on the defensive glass. And then you get Tucker DeVries. He's averaging 21, 6, and 3, almost 4 per game. And against Indiana State and Nevada this year, he's elevated his play, 27 points per game across those 3. And I think that's a nice little palate cleanser for what happened to him in the tournament last year against Miami. I think he went 1 for 13. That's got to be burning, in his memory just to try to get back to postseason play, even Arch Madness, and take over. they have 0 at-large shot. It's like 0.4%. But, Torvik views it as 27% that they win Arch Madness. I think it's a little bit better than that. And if they get in, that's a team I'm interested in riding with.
Yeah, I still have nightmares about that DeVries game because I love Drake against Miami. Speaking of the tournament last year and a team that I'm selling, like this Florida Atlantic team, I'm just not impressed with. Their defense has fallen off a cliff. They can't rebound on the defensive end. Are we sure they're in the dance? Here's the thing. Coming into this year, Florida Atlantic had that run. If they don't get that foul mess at the end against Memphis never happens. Where are they coming into this year? What is people's expectations? And then if they don't beat Arizona in double overtime, that win's probably going to get them in. But they don't have another win over a tournament team. They should have lost to Tulane. They got a bullshit call. They beat UTSA, who, by the way, UTSA is I love you, UTSA. I've bet them the last couple games, and they've covered with ease for me. But they lost. They should have lost to UTSA as well. This team, they're going to have a target on their back. Their offense is really good. They have a lot of talent on that end. But I just haven't been impressed with FAU. I'm selling them if they get in. And I'm just not fully convinced that they're 100% in right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they get left off. That Arizona win on a neutral court obviously looms so large, it'll probably end up getting them in. But I'm selling FAU and everything about them right now. And by the way, speaking of the tournament, I think this will end up taking care of itself. But two teams I don't want any part of. Just I don't want to see them anywhere near the bracket. Is Villanova and Virginia. Get Virginia out of my life. They're playing like 4 possessions slower than last year, which is insane. But this team, they're living off. They beat under a shorthanded Florida team in like the second game of the year. I think Poland didn't play. I forget who else was out. And then they beat Texas A&M, who I bet Virginia that game. Texas A&M was playing like their 4th game in a week. They had all these guys out. I think Radford was out. And they just came off that Iowa State comeback. Like those are their 2 wins from November. Can we have some context? Like those are shorthanded teams anyway. Texas A&M probably not even going to make the tournament. But they beat a Florida team is completely different. Poland wasn't playing. They're living off that, and then like a 41-40 win over Wake Forest. Like, get them out of my life. I keep seeing them in the field. Why are they in there? Anyway, who are you selling, Greg? And any thought? If you could have thoughts on Virginia, Villanova, or FAU, if you'd like.
Yeah, 137 points in their last 120 minutes of basketball. Haven't scored 50 points in a game in 3 games now for Virginia. I'm right there with you. And on Florida Atlantic, Dusty May. I feel for him because I think he's going to get a job. I know he's going to get a job, but his peak value would have been leaving after last year's run, not the whole run it back. Let's welcome the critics because you might miss the tournament. And then what does that reflect on you as a coach? So I'm going to sell high for once, boys. You'll be proud of me here. I'm going to sell Wake Forest after the huge win over Duke. This team is going to get it. That was a massive, important win, barring a huge meltdown in the final 2 weeks. They're in the field. They just are so much different at home than they are away from it. And you guys tried to warn me about it this weekend, but they're shooting 43% from 3 at home on the season. They haven't lost a game there. In 12 games outside of their own gym, they're shooting 31% from 3 this year. That's insanity. And maybe they will get hot for a game. I don't think they'll get hot for 2 games in a row. They needed a pretty generational night from Hunter Salas, 11 for 13 from the floor. Give him credit. But if Hunter Salas doesn't make 90% of his shots, they might lose to Duke. They're 6-9 against the top 2 quadrants this year. And I referenced it with Seton Hall. I like backing a coach I believe in with the underdog mentality. No disrespect to Steve Forbes, who by all accounts is a great person and he runs good offensive stuff. He's done great stuff with the transfers he has brought in. Every time I watch Wake Forest in a close game, there's a boneheaded play late and it cuts to Steve Forbes on the sidelines and he's just like laughing about it instead of taking a timeout or instead of helping manipulate the game in a good setting. I thought Wake almost blew this game with some boneheaded turnovers late while Steve Forbes was just kind of clapping on the sidelines. I don't trust him at all. I have to sell Wake Forest. I think that's a team I'm going to circle immediately, no matter the matchup, and think they're going to lose their first game in the field.
Yeah, it's hard to ultimately I just don't trust the Wake Forest defense when they're away from home. And I think that will end up being their downfall. Calabrese, who you selling?
This is a team I'm excited to talk about. You know, finding teams on the bubble that I wanted to buy was a little bit difficult. Selling, can't wait to sell Utah. Bracket Matrix evaluates the top 100 bracketologists, the ones that are most accurate year over year. Utah is in just 45 of those 100 brackets, making them the most vulnerable at-large team in the hypothetical field. They've lost 4 or 5, including that critical loss to Colorado. I was trying to sell Stuck and Randall on buying Colorado plus 320 to make the tournament on Thursday.
I agree with you.
That was the game that they had to have, and in my opinion, it starts to elbow out Utah from the field. And the issue for the Utes too is when you look down the stretch, the 3 games that they have coming up, Stanford, Cal, and Oregon State, that's not moving the needle at all. And if you lose any of those, I think that's it for your at-large hopes, even going into the Pac-12 tournament. All of those teams have losing records overall. So that's, you can't do anything about your schedule, but that's a reality. So a top 4 finish in the Pac-12 is off the table. That means the bye to the quarterfinals is gone. And then there's a lot of statistical red flags for me. I just talked about the turnover margin. They have negative turnover margin on the season, which is a big issue. Even though they're the 5th tallest team in D1, they're 140 in offensive rebounds per game. 140th, I should say. That's ridiculous. Like, given, Carlson and everything that they have in their front court, they should be a lot better. They get themselves into close games. They're 350th as a team from the line, shooting sub 65%. And then recent losses to Washington, Arizona State, and USC, they're getting worse as the season progresses, not better. So I'm shocked that they're in as many hypothetical brackets as they are. I think this Utes team is also hurt by the fact that the Pac-12 is down. I think that's the public perception. I think that's correct. So I'm just shocked that they're even hovering around on the bubble right now. If I could, I'd probably lay minus 150, minus 200 that they're not going to make the field.
I'm looking at bracket makers now. Virginia's in 99 of 100 brackets.
I know, it's crazy.
Who's that one? That one needs a raise. Who doesn't have Virginia in? The one bracketologist. And the net, I got to look at the net. New Mexico only dropped 4 spots in the net for losing to Air Force at home. What is that? They dropped 21 to 25. I figured that they would drop a little bit more than that. Yeah, I agree. I don't think Utah's making the tournament. I'm surprised they're in per bracket matrix. I don't think that they're getting in. That blowout loss to Colorado was huge. Colorado, they'll need to. Let me look at Colorado.
Yeah, they still have work to do. They absolutely have to secure.
Yeah, they're not in right now. They have to sweep.
4, yeah.
And then let's look. So they'll.
Colorado, one of their biggest issues is their best non-conference win is Richmond's. That's it. Whereas you were just talking about FAU.
Well, and they beat Miami on a neutral. Miami is just fading into
exactly.
oblivion straight to hell. So that doesn't help. They beat Wazoo at home. But yeah, that's their best. So they got a sweep, which they're at Oregon. That's going to be their toughest game. And then if let's see, they're projected. Yeah, they'll be a 3 so if they sweep, they'll be a 3 seed. And then they'll probably have to get to like the Pac, they'll have to make a run in the Pac-12 tournament. All right, good stuff there. With some buy and sell bubble teams in right now, 20 days from now, we will all have a bracket. We'll be breaking it down here and elsewhere. So I can't wait, but we have plenty of regular season and then conference tournament action before we get to that point. Speaking of which, let's go to some spots that we have circled for early in the week for today, tomorrow. If you wanted to mention something, Wednesday or later, you're more than welcome to do so. I'll kick things off. I played Baylor tonight against TCU. I think I have Baylor a couple points better than TCU on a neutral court. And I think TCU has benefited from a lot of 3-point shooting, which is why 3-point variance, I should say, which is why they've risen up the metrics at such a rapid pace. But they are they're shooting. What are they shooting in conference by? 38.2% in conference play. I think they're shooting 40% from three over the past month. They are not a great 3-point shooting team. They're also, I just think that this is a decent matchup for Baylor. Baylor in the first meeting, by the way, which went to triple overtime, was a crazy game, shot 6 of 22 from three. Baylor's on the opposite end of that spectrum. They started off so hot from three, and during conference play, they I think are due for even a little bit of a positive regression bump here. So I think this game should be closer to like one pick, maybe. We'll see if Langston Love goes. We'll see if Uday goes. But I think this is more of a coin flip game. I think Baylor bounces back from that loss against Houston, and this game goes right down to the wire. So I took the points with Baylor tonight. Greg, any thoughts there? And what do you got?
Baylor's an absolute don't touch for me, mostly because I'm like a bitter ex with them and them forcing me to buy Calabrese's shirt right now. But I like the spot. I like the logic behind it from you. I'm going to go back to the Well boys. You guys have heard me talk about this team, but I've got a spot for Tuesday. It's Loyola Chicago. They're going to be underdogs on the road at St. Bonaventure. I am just convinced that this team is legitimately good, and I like the way they have trended. If you go through the Torvik numbers and you sort it by month, this team is getting better and better and better month by month over the course of the season. Since January 1st, they're 56th in the nation. Since February 1st, they're 33rd in the nation, and that matches what I'm seeing with my eyes. They don't do anything particularly special. Like, this isn't an elite team in any one area, although they are pretty great protecting the rim, because Miles Rubin, as a true freshman, is one of the best block rate guys in the sport. He's going to be a problem for years to come. But they're just very solid. They don't really beat themselves too much. They've covered 7 consecutive games right now. I still feel they're very mispriced in the market. And for this game specifically against the Bonnies, I think Loyola is going to get some pretty easy looks here. And with Rubin, I don't think Bonaventure is going to get much. Loyola shoots 53% from 2-point range on the season. That's 86th in the country. The Bonnies are 264th nationally in 2-point defense. If Loyola is able to execute on shots at the rim here, I think they're going to open up at least as like 3 or 4 point dogs, if not more. KenPom has it as a 5-point spread. I think they can win this game, but anything on the plus side, I think there's value.
Yeah, Loyola seemingly just covers every game now. So that was the update from Greg, aka the president of the Drew Valentine fan club.
He's good, man. He's good. Like, Stucker, you know,
I give you credit. I give you credit.
Well, look me in the eyes, man. Like, Dusty May is the hottest name on the board for the coaching carousel this year. Why? We got a 32-year-old killer in Chicago right now who just signed 2 international 4-stars this week. Like, he deserves a little love.
Yeah, I mean, what job would you rather have, Loyola or DePaul?
Loyola. Well, DePaul. No, thanks.
I think that's right.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to say, though. Kyle Reese, what do you got early week?
Real quick on Dusty May. How did he get all those guys to come back? I think if they end up going
because they made a run. Here's the crazy thing. If they didn't make a run, though, like say they lost in the first round, like, well, a lot of those guys are either going to the NBA or testing pro waters or transferring, right?
He didn't just say for sentimental factors, let's run it back.
And well, they got paid.
They all had a Coach Carter moment or something. Like, no, yeah, they got a bag.
Yeah, they got a bag. But listen, if they didn't, the crazy thing is, like, because of that run, as Greg alluded to earlier, he probably should have taken like a job somewhere else. It's the peak of his value. The opportunity was probably the best for him. But if they lose that game in Memphis, then his name is, this is life. This is like life. Life is just a bunch of, you set yourself up for success, but then a lot of it is just, people that are like CEOs of companies. You get them in a room and give them truth serum. A lot of them are very open about this, but they'll just say like, yeah, I got a couple lucky breaks, right? I was at the right place at the right time, and then I got promoted to here and there, and then was friends with this guy, and that's what it is. So he should have taken that job there if he'd like life make a tree of his life. He didn't. He came back, but if they didn't make that run, then none of those guys probably come back, and then FAU is just terrible this year. Does he then? But then would he have the opportunity? Pretty crazy. I don't know.
Well, I mean, last thing on Dusty May, because I know people are not tuning in for the Dusty May show, but if he wins a tournament game, gets in, wins a tournament game, and then, they lose by 6 to a 2 seed or a 1 seed, like, Are you back in on him being a hot name, or do you think
Well,
it's just
if he
totally
makes a run, yeah, or if he, yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll be if he gets to like the second weekend again with this team. Yeah, he'll be a hot commodity again. Obviously, if they go to like the Elite Eight again too, but yeah, if they win a game, I think he'll get his job. I just don't think it'll be as good as the job he would have got if he did it after last year. But
All right,
what
hopping
do you
in
got
for
for early
my
week?
my play on Monday is also the Baylor TCU game. I agree with you. I think Baylor's a little bit better on the road, and I think for that reason, it's going to be a back and forth game. I like over 148. TCU, you mentioned it. They've been hot from three. They've scored over 75 points per game in four straight. The last time these two teams played, they both had 76 points in regulation. And Baylor remains a bottom third defensive team in the Big 12, nearly outside the top 100 in Torvik. And both have something to bring to the table in terms of pushing this game over the total. TCU leads the nation in fast break points at almost 20 per game. It helps that they're shooting so well from 3-point range, but they don't absolutely have to have that to score in the 70s. Whereas Baylor's the second best 3-point shooting team in the country, over 40% from long range. So I'll go with kind of a carbon copy of their first meeting and see this game played in the mid to upper 70s and go past the number of 148.
I'll bring up two other ones for tomorrow just quickly. You mentioned it, Greg. I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but I'll be curious to see. I mean, the spot is there for Notre Dame, who's playing better of late. They're going to get Wake Forest at home, who basically, got their biggest win of the season against Duke. They basically, everyone has said, you punched your ticket now, right? So you got to get up and get motivated and focused for a game against Notre Dame, who has been playing better. They almost came back from 29 down, which would have been against Syracuse. They lost by 3. Thoughts and prayers anyone in late 4.5. That would have been the biggest comeback since I think it was like Delaware Drexel. One of those teams came back from like 34 down in like 2018, which is a wild game. But I'll be looking. Let's see. What do I project this at? Yeah, I would love to get like 7.5 or more. Don't know if we'll get it. Probably get like 5. And then I'll be looking to potentially fade my Cats. Kentucky off that win. They're probably gonna be a short dog, but they're just not consistent enough for me yet. And Mississippi State is, I know that they beat them at home earlier this season, but Mississippi State, Kentucky got a very generous whistle in that game at home. Mississippi State's like the exact team that, with Tolu Smith in the middle, very physical team. So the spot is there for Mississippi State, and I think the Bulldogs are the exact team that I think Kentucky struggles with, especially on the road. So line dependent, but I'll be looking at for potentially Mississippi State and Notre Dame on Tuesday in some good spots. What do you got, Greg?
My last one's another Tuesday night spot, and I'm going to try to learn from mistakes on the weekend here. I was vocal that without Kevin McCullough, Kansas was dead to me. Not so much. Kansas at home. Fog Allen still has Fog Allen powers. They got BYU here. KenPom has Kansas as a 4-point favorite at home over BYU. I have no idea what this is going to open up at. Honestly, I'd love your guys' thoughts here, because it feels like we're going to get Kansas backers are going to get some value given the fact that McCullough is out indefinitely. But the metrics love BYU in a big way still, despite all of their struggles. I don't really get it. I think this BYU team is pretty fraudulent, in my opinion. They've lost 3 straight in Big 12 play, all by 10 plus on the road. 2-6 overall in true road games this year. 0-6 overall in road games against the top 69 teams in the country. They haven't beaten anybody with a pulse. This is one of those turnarounds where, Saturday to Tuesday, BYU on the road, 2 straight games, Kansas at home, 2 straight games. And maybe I'm getting duped by this, but I felt the eye test of watching Kansas against Texas. It looked like a team that was no longer in limbo, whereas the last couple of weeks, it's like, well, is McCullough back? Is he not? Over the weekend, it looked like a team that knows they're not getting McCullough back for a while. So, DeJuan Harris, you need to be more aggressive. Nick Timberlake, you're playing 30 minutes. Get over it. Show up. They did. These guys all elevated their games over the weekend. Part of that was the fact that they're playing a Texas team that looked clueless defensively, but I think BYU has some clueless vibes defensively as well. If that's anything under like Kansas -6, even up to maybe 6.5, 7 at home, I love the Jayhawks in that spot. I think they're the class there.
Yeah, BYU is an interesting case study because the metrics still love them. And like the metrics, like sites like KenPom, they're like equal to Kansas, right? They're like in that 15-ish range, and that's because they beat the shit out of teams early in the season. And I mean, BYU, they were beating teams by like 50 and 60 points. But just look at their defense on the road. They might get cooked in transition here. And yeah, if you like Kansas, I would bet them early because you also saw Kansas State. I had Kansas State. I think I bet them +2 overnight. If you go right before game time, Kansas State got hammered. I think they closed as a 2-point favorite. And they just kept taking money. So yeah, there's certainly some people I think wisely betting against BYU, especially on the road. They are just a different team. Their defense falls off a cliff, and yeah, they just might get cooked by this Kansas offense that was what shot almost like 70% against Texas. I don't know. I don't think Texas was ranked, but Wake Forest almost broke the record for field goal percentage against a ranked team over the past 25 years against Duke, but they missed a couple late. But I believe then later in the day, Kentucky actually broke the record. What did they end up shooting? They shot. What did they end up shooting? I gotta pull this up. What did Kentucky shoot against Alabama? Someone look that up. Kentucky, Alabama. Got it. Yeah, 63.1%. I think that's the record over the past 25 years against a ranked team. So anyway, some crazy offensive output on Saturday. What do you got? You got anything else, Cowboys?
Yeah, I got one more going with an A10 special here. Davidson traveling to Dayton. Dayton probably laying 10 in this game. You may be able to get a single-digit number because Davidson's season has really kind of fallen apart in heartbreaking fashion. 4 of their 5 losses, or excuse me, 4 of their 5 losses have been 5 points or less. And like it's difficult to look at that and think to yourself that the Wildcats are going to mail this game in or they're going to get run off the floor. But the last time they played, they lost by 13 against the Flyers. And that was a game that Holmes really didn't do much on the offensive end. And then I always circle this in Anthony Grant's special off of a loss. Since taking over at Dayton in 2017, he's covered 60% of the time coming off of a loss. That's top in the A10, 9th nationally. And I really like Dayton to shut down Davidson again defensively. Evan Maya has 4 Dayton starters in the top 10 of individual defensive ratings in the A10. And for that reason, I think it's going to be a very similar outcome to the first go around. I would love to get it under 10, but I'd play it up to 10, 10.5.
Yeah, Davidson's actually impressed with the defensive end, but that offense, it just doesn't work if you can't shoot, and they can't shoot. So and they miss Skogman in that aspect as well. But they're like outside the top 300, I think, from 3-point range, and that offense just doesn't work if you don't have shooters, which they've generally had under the McKillops. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this Davidson team, but their defense has been much better than I expected it to be. All right, good stuff there. It is the last non-March early week episode. We'll be back next Monday to recap the weekend and look ahead to the early week when it is March. And guys from 3-Man, we will be back Wednesday. We'll be back later in the week. Also, BBOC Live. We'll have an episode Tuesday night and Saturday morning, as always, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. So make sure you check us out there. Also, subscribe, unsubscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Thanks to Greg and Mike for joining me. Thanks to our producer, Matt Mitchell, on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Leave a 5-star review. Say whatever. Did some giveaways last week. I'll do a bunch more throughout March. So those really help us out. But thanks for tuning in. Good luck on all of your wagers this week. March will be here soon. Cheers.